A very warm welcome to Julianne Moore and Sebastián Lelio. I want to know a little bit about how this began, because as I told the audience earlier, Gloria was a wonderful film from Chile, 2013, great performance by Paulina Garcia. And the idea of an American remake, was it that you first saw Gloria and felt that you wanted to try an American version? Was it that you were thinking of an American version and felt that Julianne Moore would be perfect? How did this begin?
Okay.
Please.
So I saw the original film and was so moved by it, tremendously moved and enthralled actually by Paulina Garcia and by Sebastian's work. And I thought, oh God, I'd give anything to meet this guy and to work with him. And we actually have a manager in common. And she said, you know, he lives in Berlin. I know you're going to Paris. Maybe we can arrange a meeting. And I was like, I would love to, because I really wanted to work with him. So she arranged the meeting, but somehow it had been communicated to Sebastian that I wanted to meet him, but I was not interested in doing a remake of his film. So we got there and we're talking at this little restaurant, and we talked for about an hour. And at the end of it, he said, "Well, thank you very much. It's been really interesting talking to you, and I understand that you don't want to do, anything having to do with this film." And I said, "No. I would definitely do it, but only if you directed it." And then he said, "Well, I would only do it if you acted in it." Mm-hmm. And then we were like, "Okay, let's do it."
Yeah. And Sebastián, you worked with different screenwriters for the version that was done in Chile and this one. I actually jotted down some names because I wanted to make sure, but I can't even find it quickly in my notes. The idea being that you wanted to keep the basic character and situations, but to have a context of Americana as opposed to your native country?
Yes, I mean the idea was not to invent everything again, but to honor whatever made the first version, because now it's a version. What it was, to revisit that, but some adaptation to the culture was necessary. So that's why I needed the help of Alice, who was a great collaborator. When it was about fine-tuning the cultural texture, and so that's why. But I took it almost like as a play, that is staged again in a different country with a new group of fantastic actors. So that's one analogy. And the other one I like is kind of like a cover of a song, played with a new rock band.
That's right.
So you don't want to deform whatever made that melody the melody that it is, but you want to find a new vibration, a new energy, and that's coming mainly not only from the style, because I made 2 films in the meantime. In the meantime, yes.
Yeah.
So I was somewhere else as a person and as a filmmaker, but this is a film about people and about feelings, and especially about Gloria. So this is a portrait of a woman that is observed from every possible angle, going through the entire emotional spectrum. So when that is, when a new human being comes in to be observed, then somehow, even though the story remains more or less the same, the DNA, it's modified.
Sure. And one thing that I felt was the same in both films is the importance of glasses. Because in almost every scene, Gloria is wearing glasses. We're aware of them in her yoga class, for example. And I was wondering if part of the importance of that, first of all, for you, how important were the glasses in terms of physically being Gloria? And was it partly because you were both calling attention to the question of perception, of point of view. In other words, if you have to wear eye drops, if you have to use eye drops rather, then it's questioning how you see. And is Gloria trying to see better, more deeply in the course of the film?
Oh, that's a nice question,
It's
right?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I remember when we were doing the first costume tests, and suddenly a group of glasses arrived, and then you were trying them, and suddenly you did something with your hair. It wasn't still blonde, but you, some little magic thing, and then you put the glasses on, and suddenly we all went like, oh,
Yeah.
Gloria is here.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know, those glasses have a certain power.
And for you too, did you feel you needed them to be that character?
I think so. I mean, they felt like they were a part of her. They felt like they were a part of how she presented herself to the world. I think that I'm endlessly fascinated by our compulsion to decorate our bodies and our environment. You know, it's not necessary to dress in a way, but all of these things are signifiers. I don't know that I could tell you exactly what they signify, but the fact that she chooses to wear these glasses, to wear these two different colors, and the way she dresses specifically, you know, all of it identifies her as a woman at a certain in a certain culture at a certain place in time, who defines herself in a certain way. You know, I feel like for me, I feel like Gloria's the kind of person who's worn glasses since she was 9. And they're just a part of her, and she never considered contact lenses. They just bothered her. You know, it was like that kind of thing. She made this decision that this is who she was, that she was sticking with it.
And she seems comfortable in her skin.
Oh, yeah.
Including glasses and everything else. They even reminded me at one point when I was watching of the glasses that Dustin Hoffman puts on in Tootsie to become a woman.
Oh, you discovered us.
What's that?
You discovered us.
Yeah.
You were thinking of that? Oh,
I mean, I really like Tootsie, but it's not.
Well, actually, what's Tootsie about? Learning to become a better woman, even if you're a man. So I think the story of Gloria, you know, has just an underlying connection, learning to be a woman of a certain age, able to demand her right to pleasure, to adventure, even if she is, shall we say, not perfect.
Who is? Nobody's perfect. But you know, she is what I love about Gloria. She's authentically herself. You never feel like she's trying to shoehorn herself into some idea of who she should be. You know, and she's not even. I think the thing about the central romance that I find so compelling is that she's not particularly looking for romance. She's just going out to dance, and she meets this guy, and she has a one-night stand. She expects it to be a one-night stand, and then when he calls, she's totally flabbergasted. She's like, you want to go out on a date? Okay. You know, she's really, you know, she's been married. That's not something that she's necessarily looking for again. So she gets caught up into his mess, you know, and I think there's part of this thing like, wow, how did I, and then she can't extricate herself, you know.
Right.
In that sense,
I mean, that's one of the things that for me makes Gloria a film, and Gloria Bell, completely a film of our time. Because if I think back to the feminist movies of the 70s, An Unmarried Woman, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, the assumption was always that the woman that we're following throughout the film will end up with sort of a new right man, whether it's Alan Bates or Chris Christopherson.
Oh, how terrible, Alan Bates.
Yeah,
right?
I was ready to jump right
I was
in
like,
and
my
identify.
God, yeah.
But what makes both the Chilean version and the film we've just seen, I think, special is that Gloria chooses to dance alone at the end, in both versions. Without her glasses, by the way.
Right.
There's a certain freedom. She is free and mobile and not dependent on anyone. And that's not something I would associate with an earlier decade. It's something more, I think, of our own time. So, yeah. Well, now, you mentioned that you directed 2 films in between, and I just remind everybody that A Fantastic Woman, brilliant movie about transgender, and Disobedience, your first English language film. And it seems to me that when I compare Gloria Bell to Gloria, you have matured as a filmmaker. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you learned in making the 2 films in between that gave you a perhaps richer palette to work from in Gloria Bell.
If I only knew. maybe not knowing is a sign of maturity. No, I think that I have always, until I made Gloria, which is my 4th feature film. Before that, I made 3 very small budget guerrilla feature films. I was always very concentrated in trying to grasp hopefully complex levels of humanity, and trying to portray people and not characters on screen. So I was maybe sacrificing some elements that could make the style more sophisticated, because I was desperately trying to make it humane. Mm-hmm. And then when I somehow managed to inhabit that territory, that I think it happened naturally in the first Gloria, I was ready to add some sophistication to the language. And I think that's the transition. It's really weird to talk about your own work with distance, because you're mostly blind to what you're doing. But if you ask me to do it, I think this is what happened. A Fantastic Woman is a film that hopefully has that humanity, that human aspect, but at the same time the language is much more sophisticated, and the cameras are not handheld, and everything is floating, and they are on cranes or dollies or Steadicam, so it's more, I don't know, stylized. And then Disobedience is somewhere in between the two worlds again. So when we made Gloria Bell, I wanted to integrate all those elements, and I wanted to add to the very, so to say, alive element of the film, this feeling that you're watching real people on screen, and that you have been sitting in those tables or sleeping in those beds or something like that.
Or singing in that car.
Or singing in that car. Add to that a layer of visual sophistication and a certain elegance in the calligraphy of the film language.
Well, the film that we just watched, it's so clearly character-based. I mean, obviously you have great affection and sympathy for all your characters, I think. I'm curious for you, Julianne, whether there were certain challenging aspects of playing Gloria Bell. And I don't just mean topless scenes, which takes a certain degree of courage when you are no longer 25 or whatever. But no, I mean and even, all right, here's my scene that I'm going to ask you about, because both times that I watched this movie, when Gloria puts Arnold's cell phone into the bowl of soup, just something in me goes, she didn't just do that, did she?
Yeah.
How challenging was that?
She's brave, right? I mean, she's so brave. That's the thing that I love about Gloria. She's also, she's so impulsive that sometimes you're like, wait a minute, just calm down. But the thing that makes her so appealing and so lively and so unusual is that kind of crazy impulsiveness. This idea that she's actually kind of present and vibrating, like right on the present. So she's not even thinking, she's just thinking, here's his phone. I love that. I could never do that. I would consider every possibility before I did something like that. I don't know that I would pick a guy up at a craps table either, and she does that. I mean, so there are all these things that you see, and that what's interesting to me is that it's the same woman. The same woman that you see at the beginning of the film, who is so connected to all the people that she loves, who's kind of unbelievably optimistic, who kind of throws herself into laugh therapy and into and into yoga class and into everything, and is seemingly unperturbed when her daughter leaves, when they're going to have lunch and smoke a cigarette anyway. All that stuff. She's that same person as the person who dumps the phone in the soup and hooks up with a guy on a bus in Vegas. So there's this line that goes all the way through. So that current of who she is, that's so unusual, because often in a movie you're dealing with an arc. You're like, where's this character going? What is she learning? What gets her there? And what I found with her is that there's this kind of steadiness that goes all the way through it. So to try to be even in that way, but also not big, because she doesn't telegraph
Yeah.
anything. And no one's watching her but the audience. So that means you're not performing for anybody. She's not telling anybody she's doing this stuff. It's like, it's minuscule. That was very, very challenging and exciting for me as an actor to try to perform. Yeah.
And I'll confess that actually both Disobedience and Gloria Bell, I found myself feeling at moments even more sympathy for the male character, David, played by Alessandro Nivola in the previous film, and Turturro's Arnold in this film. And I think that might be a testament, because even though, Sebastián, you are clearly drawn to female characters of great complexity and depth, you really are a humanist for whom there aren't bad guy characters, no easy villains. I mean, do you want us to kind of empathize at moments with Arnold as well as Gloria?
I think so, yes. But I need to empathize with them as well. I need to find a connection with Arnold, for example, in this case. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't know where to put the camera. You know, I need to be on his side, even if I know that he will do a couple of things that might be questionable, you know. And in this case, my connection with Arnold is that the guy is really trying, you know, and he really wants to change, and he is doing strange things to get there, like assuming that maybe if you change the outside, like if you have a surgery and, you know, you might then change inside, which is okay if you analyze it from the exterior, from an exterior perspective. You might think that that doesn't make any sense, but that's his logic, and it's respectable, you know, and I can relate to it. The thing is that maybe Gloria is too much for him, you know, and when that scene in Vegas when she says, why don't we take a trip? Let's go to Europe. Let's go to Spain. You know, and he's like, you know, like, I don't know if I would survive Spain.
Right,
you know,
I made it to Vegas.
Exactly. I barely survived a couple of hours in Vegas, and she's inviting me to Spain. Like, so I understand his fear, you know, and therefore I can empathize with him.
And by the way, the casting, I thought, of John Turturro was marvelous, because I've seen him from his youth until this rather mature part. He's growing into a wonderfully older character range. He was a guest here a few years ago with Fading Gigolo. Was the choice of Turturro part of what you saw as a real Americanizing? Are there other actors you thought of, or was that you were in the same film, The Big Lebowski, but I don't think you ever worked together.
Worked together,
no.
yeah.
But how did the casting come about of him?
It was one of the first names we thought about, and it was immediately very exciting.
I
no?
was delighted.
Yeah, when the idea appeared, we were like, "Whoa, that sounds so!" Because he's so great, such a great actor, so subtle and so complex and so tender.
Yeah,
no?
soulful guy, very soulful guy.
And at the same time, it was such an unexpected cinematic couple. You know, like it wasn't like necessarily the first idea that anyone would have to you know, to see you and John like in a film.
Right.
I don't know.
Dancing together.
Dancing together. But then I remember we went to your house to read and to talk about the script, and I was sitting across the table and I was watching them, and I was like, yes, this is gonna work.
Well, it's also, I think, because from the very first time that he appears in the film, what's remarkable is it's the intensity of his gaze on Gloria. And this is, for me, a film, among other things, that's very much about being invisible or visible. Because actually, I mentioned backstage that I just watched in preparation for tonight a film from 2009, I think it was Chloe, directed by Adam Egoyan, which stars Julianne Moore, Liam Neeson as her husband, and Amanda Seyfried. And in that film, your character says to husband Liam Neeson, I felt myself becoming invisible as I was getting old.
Do I say that?
You actually, yes. Well, you don't say that.
God.
Catherine says that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the character's name.
I wouldn't say that. I actually would object to that line now.
Well, that's
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think that there are very few, certainly American films,
Yeah.
that focus on female characters who are over 50.
Right.
So this is unique in that sense. And I read an interview where you said that when you were younger, you felt sometimes invisible. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about this.
Let me talk about this thing. I've been thinking about this a lot the last few days. There's a book out right now called The Power of Invisibility. I was just reading the review. I haven't read the book, but in it she talks about this notion. It makes me kind of crazy that this cultural notion that when a woman is older, she becomes invisible. Well, that hasn't been my experience personally, and I want to say, like, invisible to whom? Because of course, like, I feel like I see all the women in my life. They see me. So who are you? Who do you feel invisible? You know, what in your culture is telling you that you're invisible? And then somebody, I remember one woman said to me, a younger woman said, well, my mother feels invisible when the 23-year-old barista in the coffee shop is not flirting with her. And why would she want this kid to flirt with her? And I said, why is that important? And then, anyway, this book is about, if you feel that you are invisible, that means that you consider yourself an object. If you are a subject, you are never invisible. So I feel, yeah, right? So it's making me kind of crazy because I think this notion of invisibility is being foisted on us by a culture that we have outgrown. Because I do not believe that women need to be objects in a culture ever. I don't think anybody needs to be an object. So this narrative that keeps playing out, and like I said, 10 years ago when I did Chloe, I don't think I was even thinking about that, but I think also culturally things have changed too, where we're starting to say, like, wait, what is this yoke that we're carrying around? This is not our narrative. This is a narrative that's been given to us by an ancient culture that we now reject. So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we take questions from the audience, I do want to ask you, Sebastián, how was it different making an American film with Julianne Moore in the United States from the experience of making in Chile the same basic story with Paulina Garcia? Are the conditions much different, or is it ultimately you're making what you want in either culture?
It might be a rare case, but I would have never accepted making this film without the same amount of freedom with which I made the first one. That would have not made any sense, no? So I have to say that they were very similar in terms of that at the end of the day, you know, maybe there were a few more trailers. That's the difference. We don't use trailers until you almost never have that. And some scenes in the first version, I shot them in my own apartment, you know, because we had very little money. But apart from that, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. There is the camera, the complicity with the actors, and you're always late.
Yeah.
So it felt like I was at home.
Okay. And maybe if, Julianne, you could talk, because you've worked with some of the great directors.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to, like, Robert Altman and Louis Malle and Todd Haynes and Alfonso Cuarón and the Coen brothers and Paul Thomas Anderson, Tom Ford, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I really liked his directorial debut. And your character, Esther, she introduces this video porn addict played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt to making love as an older woman, and I thought it was magnificent. Jay Roach and Fernando Meirelles, Tom Kalin. How is working with Sebastián either similar to or different from these major filmmakers you've worked with?
Well, Sebastián's a major filmmaker, man. You know, he's major, and he's, and his point of view is so clear. It was so clear to me the first time I saw Gloria, what was great, actually, and made me want to pat myself on the back, is that you know, after you made Fantastic Woman and won the Oscar, I was like, yeah, I already met that guy. I'm going to make a movie with him. You know, like you could see in your work, like just how major you were and how clear your vision was and how able you were to shape it, communicate it, and send it out visually and linguistically. And so that's all I ever want to do. You know, my job as an actor is to come and interpret somebody's point of view, and his was so clear. And he's the one thing that's interesting about him too is how specific he is in his direction and how deeply he digs. Because, you know, often in independent film, if we get 1 or 2 takes, that's great. Well, David Cronenberg, for example, will sometimes just do 1 take and move on, because he started with non-professionals and he didn't want to upset the apple cart. He didn't think people could repeat it. So you don't get a lot of takes with him because that's his thing. Sebastián will do as many as we have time for.
Yeah.
So then at first I was left feeling like maybe I'm not pleasing him, he's not getting what he wants, but he just always wanted to go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further, and it was exhilarating and also I don't know, not exhausting. I wasn't exhausted by it, but I felt tested by it. Because I didn't know all the time. I'm like 10 takes of, you know, pushing my hair back. Like what am I missing?
Sorry,
right?
Julianne.
Yeah, no. But it was interesting because I was like, he's looking for something. What is he looking for? How can I find it? But so to work at that kind of that with that teeny bit of detail, that was really fascinating for me.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to ask a question that's based on the fact that I showed in my class at Columbia 2 weeks ago, A Woman Under the Influence, which I think remains one of the greatest film portraits of a female character. And John Cassavetes, much like you, I think, was drawn to complex female figures at the center of his stories. Is Cassavetes, or are there other filmmakers to be considered kind of inspirational for you?
Oh, Cassavetes, definitely. I mean, he made a film called Gloria.
I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to go there just yet, but...
And I do consider A Woman Under the Influence one of the greatest films
Ever.
That I've seen in my life. It seems that you're watching something that is real. And anyone that has been involved in filmmaking know how hard it is to capture that kind of vibe. It's maybe the hardest. Yeah. And Gina Rowlands, I have to say, is a big influence for me. You know, that is kind of like bigger than life attitude that is so amazingly inspiring and beautiful. I mean, we were thinking a lot about her when we were writing Gloria, you know. Yeah.
Julianne, for you also, would Gina Rowlands be one of the sort of inspirations for you, or are there other actresses, especially when you were starting out, that you went back to their films to get a sense of what it is that you really wanted to do?
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I think the movie that made me want to be a film actor was 3 Women.
Oh,
Yeah.
Robert Altman's film.
Yeah.
I actually remember that one so vividly.
And I can still see them, Sissy Spacek and Shelley Duvall, in that scene
And
in the bar.
Joanne...
Yeah, and Janice.
Janice Rule. Janice Rule.
The 3 of them, I was like, what is this kind of acting that I'm seeing? And what is this sort of, it was the first time I really noticed directorial eye, you know, the gaze that I was talking about, where I thought, oh, someone's telling me to watch this story this way, and I'm watching these women in these spectacular and very nuanced performances. And so that sort of woke me up, because I didn't really know anything about film. I loved it, but I didn't think that was where I was headed. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do that, where you can't tell, where you don't know if it's acting or not.
Yes.
You know, where you feel it's so close to life that you're kind of entranced by it, you know. Behavioralism is more interesting to me, you know, than anything else, than theatrics, actually.
Of course.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite among your own roles? Because I was going through your filmography and I kept going, no, that's my favorite. No, that's my favorite. I'll tell you later what those are. But because you've done, what, about 70 films
Something
by now?
like that, yeah.
Are there particular, either the character that you play?
I don't know, I can't believe it. I know, right?
You're lucky, you're great at what you do, so you get to
Thank you.
keep doing it. But are there particular roles or films that you have special fondness for?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, believe me, there's some stinkers in there. There really are. But there are probably I don't know, maybe 20 in there that I feel like, wow, I figured something out, or I learned something, or I achieved something. But there's not one in particular, because it's the experience. It's each experience I've had with that director, with that story, with that character that's special. It's when I feel like I've maybe inhabited something that's different or learned something. So there's not just like one, yeah.
I understand that. Yeah. But I'll tell you, because probably no one here has even ever heard of the film, the prize winner of Defiance, right. Ohio, 2006. Somebody knows it.
Somebody knows it. Yeah.
Julianne Moore and Woody Harrelson, and it was just so fresh and inventive, and I hadn't seen anything quite like that. So I recommend that one. And because our next guest in April, who's going to be seated in this chair, is Ray Fiennes. I'm wondering if you have any particular, because I loved The End of the Affair, which we previewed here at the Y with Neil Jordan, the director, as my guest. If that has any special resonance.
Well, it's interesting. It's going to sound like I do this all the time, but I actually wrote Neil Jordan a letter. I never do. I mean, like, I think I very rarely in my life reached out to meet somebody, but I read The End of the Affair and really, really loved it, and wrote a letter saying that I would love to audition for it. And he said he was really only considering English actresses, and I was like, please, please let me. And when I went and tested, but was with 2 other actresses who were English, and thought I'm never going to get this, and I couldn't cry. The woman before me, we all wore the same coat in the audition, and the woman before me had had blown her nose a million times, so the pockets were filled with these tissues, and I was like, she cried the entire time. And I couldn't cry at all, because I was nervous, or I don't know what happened, but I ended up getting the job, and because I loved that script so much, I felt like I could hear it, and so that's one of the ones that I really love.
Yeah, I think that your work in that, and so is Ray Fiennes' work in that, remarkable. Yeah. Since we are not going to go the full hour tonight, I promised these wonderful people that they'd be out in about 12 minutes. We're going to take some questions from the audience. Okay, I'm going to go the gentleman right here, and then I see 2 people in the middle row. Go right ahead, and I'll repeat, and then I see you down here.
Thank you so much for coming and for making this film. I'm just wondering if you had time for rehearsal.
Was there time for rehearsal? And if so, what was that process like?
There was time, but we didn't use it.
Yeah.
I personally don't feel very comfortable with rehearsing for cinema. It always feels very strange to me. I really like to, what I need the most is to feel that I'm going to be trusted and that I can trust them, and so I'm desperately trying to find that complicity before shooting, so then we can, then we all know that the set is going to be a loving set, not a tense set. I get very tense in tense sets, and that the actors and me myself, we can be daring, we can be playful, we can try things out, and that we are going to take care of each other, and that excellency and quality is the main goal, but we can afford the luxury of getting lost, trying things out, and sometimes the most beautiful sparkles come from those moments of playfulness.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big rehearser for film either, because my feeling is I want to be prepared enough with the language and with the circumstances, and to feel comfortable with the director and the actors, everything, so that we can create a circumstance where my feelings will occur on camera. Because that's the beauty of film, is that you can capture an actual moment happening for the first time. And when you do that, that's when you're just, you're like, oh, phew. Like, I don't want to have to recreate something. In the theater, you build something so that you can recreate it night after night. But in film, you want it to happen like that. And film it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gentleman here in the middle.
Ms. Moore, you must be given a lot of scripts. What is the process you go through when you want to choose your next role?
You must get a lot of scripts. What's the process that you go through in choosing what your next role will be?
Well, sometimes you get a lot of scripts and sometimes you don't. And you don't always get what you're looking for. Often, one of the issues is that if you've done a role successfully, you'll generally be asked to do something similar again. And, you don't want to do that. I'm like, if I just played this part, why do I want to do it, a second time? So it takes a lot of digging around. You have to wait and see if you have. When I read something, I'm like, do I have an affinity for the language, for the director, for the story? What is I'm attracted to? What is the point of view? When sometimes you'll receive a character and I'm like, this character doesn't exist. She's just a foil for this main character. I don't want to be that. So there are lots of considerations, but when you see something, it resonates right away. I mean, it's very clear to me. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the one that I want.
And I'll use this moment to say that you're a very busy actress. Soon we're going to have a film called After the Wedding, which is directed by the husband of Julianne Moore, Bart Freundlich, and it's based on Susanna Bier's film that had been about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're going to play another Gloria, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I'm playing Gloria Steinem right now.
Gloria Steinem?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not thinking that this is somehow destined, but one of the great icons of our time, not a fictional character, Gloria, but Gloria Steinem.
Right.
And that's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, that was cool. And that was very much about an opportunity to be part of something that really is celebrating the women's movement and what Gloria Steinem has done, and continues to do for all of us, for gender equality. So for that I would have, just that opportunity alone was enough to draw me towards that movie. Yeah.
Okay, there was that right there. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Julianne, fabulous performance.
Thank you.
I see that you were in every frame in the movie. I'm just wondering, was there one particular scene that was more difficult to enact?
You seem to be in every single frame of the movie. Was there a particular scene that was difficult to enact?
Right. Well, tell them why I was in every single frame in the movie.
Well, we weren't. She is in every single frame. Like even in the reverse angles, when we are looking to the other characters, it's always through Gloria's body. So we see her shoulders, so she's always framed. And I don't know. That's part of the strategy of the film, that the spectator is invited to, see her and observe her. Over and over until hopefully we all then end up feeling from within her skin. So yeah, it works by insisting.
Right. It is kind of this, like I said, I keep saying to everybody, we're the only ones who see ourselves in our entirety. So you see Gloria seeing and experiencing herself. Everybody else in her life, her kids see her one way, or her mom sees her another, her friends, her boyfriend, whatever, all the people she interacts with. The only other people that see Gloria in her entirety are the audience. So it does force this intimacy and this empathy that's really, really acute, so that you end up feeling that you are Gloria. Sebastian allows you that entry to another person. And so that, the most difficult thing then was probably the dance, for me, the dance at the end. Because how do I communicate something physically? A kind of there's an emotional, there's a real arc to it. It might be the one time that she reveals the most of herself. It's probably the one time where she says, like, I'm going to experience something in front of everyone, and it's physical, which for me is hard. That was really hard. Plus, we had to change the choreography at the last minute.
Yeah, I remember that. And it doesn't have any interruptions. It's one shot,
it's one
so it's
shot.
like 3.5 minutes
And
non-stop.
I noticed in the credits the choreographer Mandy Moore.
Yeah.
She worked with, because 10, 12 years ago, I was addicted to a show called You Think You Can Dance on television, and Mandy Moore was one of the regular choreographers.
Yeah.
And I saw her name took on a resonance when I saw this. There was, okay, right here. What is your advice to young women in the entertainment industry?
Well, first of all, get an education. If you want to be an actor or a screenwriter or a director or whatever, go to a program and really learn and immerse yourself. I find that I find with my peers, with actors, if they suddenly started working and later on in their life, they feel that they're operating at a deficit if they weren't trained. So you really do need to do that, and it gives you a place to learn about yourself as an actor, and or whatever you want to do. And then second of all, be really persistent. It takes such a long time, and keep your goals close. Like don't feel like you have to go from being a student or a beginner to starring in something, in a play and on a movie. It's enough at the beginning just to get auditions, and then to get callbacks, and then to get a second callback, and then to get a little job, and then like little bit at a time. It makes it much more manageable.
That also just reminds me of a tiny detail. I've noticed that you've done some of your best work for female directors who I didn't even mention. Lisa Cholodenko's The Kids Are All Right, where what a beautiful depiction of a lesbian couple where not much is made of the fact that it is a lesbian couple because Annette Bening and you inhabit those characters so completely. It's not that different from a hetero couple that's been together for 18 years.
Yeah.
And Rebecca Miller.
Yeah, my friend.
If you have not seen Maggie's Plan, which is 2 years old, I cannot urge you strongly enough. Ethan Hawke, who's been a guest here 3 times, and Greta Gerwig and you. Your character just had me laughing uncontrollably because she plays a Columbia University professor with a heavy European accent, and she's very haughty. Nothing like what I hope I am. But you do it so well, and you were also in her Pippa Lee film, right, which Rebecca Miller came here with. So I was just going to say that in addition to talking to young female actors, you've encouraged a lot of wonderful female directors by working with them and enabling them to shine, and as you shine too. I think we have time for maybe, no, actually, yes, go ahead.
In the film, you sing a lot in the car, but I was wondering personally, what is your favorite song?
In the film, you sing a lot in the car, but what is your favorite songs? What are your favorite songs to sing?
Well, as my family knows, my jam is Brick House. It's not, she's not, I mean, Gloria is a real ballad singer, I mean, she's very emotional. And Sebastián, tell them about Sebastián always says this movie is a musical, really, right? It's true,
yeah. It's a hidden musical. Yeah, it's, 2 or 3 minutes, a new song comes in and Gloria is dancing or singing them, and somehow the emotion of that music and the lyrics resonate with whatever she's going through and reveal new dimensions of the character.
Well, actually, it begins with Never Can Say Goodbye in the first scene. It ends with Gloria. Did you have to pay a fortune for music rights?
It was hard. It was a hard balance between what was dreamt and what was possible. Yeah. But that's what cinema is all about.
The limitations define the possibilities. Yeah. This film opens Friday, March 8th, at the AMC Lincoln Square, at the Angelica. If you appreciated the film, please tell your friends. We are going to have to let our wonderful guests go, so I just want to say how grateful we are to Sebastián Lelio and Julianne Moore. Bye.